identifying as LGBTQ is not a mental illness or a disorder. In many ways, health really is integration. Hi, this is Jim Breon. Welcome to this YouTube channel where we discuss all things mental health. The topic today is the intersection of LGBTQ identities and mental health. In many ways, over the last 30 or 40 years or so, LGBT people have been able to integrate their identities more and more into various aspects of their lives. And that means that they've improved their mental health, because when LGBT people are closeted and afraid to share their identities, it creates all kinds of problems with shame and hiding. So over the last few years, many people have really been able to experience much more positive mental health as a result. And one of the greatest aspects of the LGBTQ communities, and I say communities because there's not one monolithic community, is the diversity that they represent. Diversity is actually a natural and necessary part of life, and the communities represent a diversity of perspectives, experiences, and identities. There's a lot of uniqueness when it comes to race, ethnicity, spirituality, socioeconomic status, and nationalities. And there's a lot to be celebrated in this diversity, creativity, and expressions. And as far as mental health, LGBT people struggle with the same issues as everyone else, whether it's anxiety, depression, loneliness, but they also have some very specific issues that they struggle with. Even as LGBT people have grown in a sense of pride and strength in who they are, the intersection of their orientation, gender identity, and culture creates pressure points where people can start to struggle even with their mental health. And even especially now, as reactionary trends are reemerging in our country, LGBT people are being targeted again. I'm old enough to remember when this happened in the 1970s with Anita Bryant and John Briggs and the beginning of the culture wars. But in truth, this really is nothing new. LGBT people have never been understood by a lot of people and have always been otherized. So that's really kind of the same as it ever was. And it really comes down to many people projecting fears and misunderstandings and basically projecting what they want to see onto LGBT people. And many LGBTQ people still suffer with human rights and civil rights violations, discrimination, and rejection. Especially within the LGBTQ communities, there are intersecting identities, including people of color and people with disabilities. And there's actually disparities of ability to access health care. And within the communities themselves, people struggle with racism and ageism within the LGBT communities themselves. And shame and rejection that comes from families is often much worse than anything that's projected from outside in the society. We know that LGBT people are still more likely to suffer depression and anxiety, and trans women are a distinct target for physical violence. And that has actually increased over the years, not decreased. That said, identifying as LGBTQ is not a mental illness or a disorder. Yet growing up LGBT in a heteronormative society, in a world that forces people to manage the risks and personal struggles and social constructs, many people in the communities still struggle with their own mental health. And I think we have to recognize that LGBT people have a different developmental pathway in many ways than heterosexual people. We have to recognize that, for example, a gay man was once a gay child. And if you think about these different developmental pathways, many straight kids, when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, are making up and breaking up with boyfriends and girlfriends all the time. They're rewarded for bringing their boyfriend or girlfriend home, celebrating at the prom. But for many LGBT people, while that's happening, they're actually learning how to hide aspects of their identity because they're not safe and they're not comfortable being out about who they are. For many of them, there isn't a roadmap. And identity development for them can either be positive or it can be fraught with many issues. So some of the specific mental health risks that the LGBT community struggle with are, first of all, coming out. Now, though acceptance has grown in many situations and many places, not all, revealing your sexual orientation or identity can still be overwhelming or even dangerous. We do recognize that being out is a marker of healthy, integrated LGBT identity, yet it's not healthy or safe for all people. Some people actually risk losing family support, depending on the specific family and the culture that they live in. And unfortunately, many people who come out in some families are still ostracized, even kicked out of the family unit. LGBT people still suffer trauma, and they continue experiencing bullying, abuse, shame, and threats, and physical violence. And that increases the tendency for people to develop things like PTSD and complex PTSD. Rejection is still a major issue when it comes to dealing with an LGBT person's mental health. The risk of rejection keeps many people from being open about their identities, and rejection and the risk of harassment can negatively impact a person's mental health. We have to look at issues like addiction and substance misuse. Many people, whether you're LGBT or not, many people turn to substances to manage stress and difficult emotions. This is a human issue. And substance misuse in the LGBT communities is still higher than the general population. And people turn to substances often to manage anxiety, depression, and all the rest that they have to deal with, including minority stress. Homelessness is still a big problem for LGBT youth and young adults. And the threat of abandonment and homelessness are still more than twice as high for these communities than the general public. LGBT people are overrepresented in the foster care system as well, where, again, they can be targets for abuse. And unbelievably, many families still will turn out their LGBT kids. They'll literally turn them out onto the streets because of their inability to accept and embrace them and their identity. This, I think, is one of the most heartbreaking things when you see that a family's thoughts and beliefs become more important than their own children. Suicide and self-harm are still higher in the LGBT communities, and especially as people suffer in silence, their mental health worsens, and suicide rates among LGBT individuals still continues to be higher than the general public. According to the CDC, high school students are actually 4 times more likely to have attempted suicide than their heterosexual peers. And 40% of transgender adults at one point had attempted suicide in their lifetime. The statistics can be overwhelming and frightening. And yet, many people with appropriate support, autonomy, and resilience manage to lead very happy and healthy and productive, meaningful lives. But if you are struggling with some of these issues, when you need help, it's important to know where to turn, where you can get help. And if you're interested in doing therapy and you're part of the communities, then find an LGBT affirming therapist, somebody who is not going to put you at risk of being re-traumatized and judged or shamed by your own therapist. And I've talked to people who have had these kind of experiences. An LGBT affirming therapist can help normalize your experience, including the minority stress and the mental health struggles. They can help people develop emotional awareness and emotion regulation and acceptance. And it helps people develop more of a sense of empowerment and even healthy assertiveness. It can validate and focus on your unique strengths and help you learn to bring those out and support developing healthy identity formation and relationships and sexuality. In many ways, health really is integration, and the more an LGBT person can integrate their identity into their lives, the various aspects of their lives, from home, work, their public persona, the better people tend to do with their mental health. If the videos are helpful, I encourage you to like and subscribe and sign up for notifications. And feel free to put a comment and let me know what you think, what questions you might have, and maybe other topics that you would find interesting. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.